when one looks online, there's lots of information for people transitioning and lots of wonderful YouTubers, which is always important and impressive, and it sort of eases the path a little. But the reality is most of that is for people who are under 30. Now, we have both seen 55 go by quite a while ago.
Yeah.
But for
Can't remember that far back.
Yeah, exactly. Seems like in the dawn of history. However, in I think in both of our lives, we've decided slightly later in life to make this shift. Now, I think one of the most challenging things for you must have been that you had built this very big presence in your life, and then you make this shift, and then it's almost like going back to zero. But you used a very important word there. You said the invisible. Lenny, who is often on this site, has talked about when people age, they become invisible.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder how much of this is the trans side of things and how much of it is aging.
Well, I think if you're looking at intergenerational community, I think that that's very true, that as you age, you do become invisible anyway, and especially for women. And I think that's true also for trans women. And so that's that piece. But in terms of people in my generation or around my generation, say 10 years younger than me and up to my age, are the people, those were my people in my music community.
Right.
And that was hugely my audience in Europe, in the States, and in Canada. And I've disappeared for the last 10 years from a car accident and then my transition and so on. And so I'm coming back, and everything has changed. And I mean, the world has changed so dramatically anyway in the last 10 years. So I'm trying to make sense of that. But, you look at the positives, and the positives are I've lived a very rich, strong life. And I have learned a lot. And so I'm not coming to this reinvention with no knowledge.
Right.
I'm coming with a considerable amount of awareness and experience, and because of the fact that I am very capable at analyzing things, and I'm also willing to not only just use the intellectual side of things, asking those kinds of questions, I also emotionally and spiritually ask myself questions around how do I make life more meaningful for me? How do I model that for others? How do I be an elder for young trans folks? Many trans folks that I talk to are 50 years younger than me, and so half a century is a big gap. And I see how much they struggle the way all of us are struggling in these times of... just as a funny thing, I went out yesterday to go and buy the newspaper with my article in it. There are no places in my neighborhood that sell newspapers anymore.
Yeah.
So in Canada, they don't let you post news stories on Facebook, and it's a similar thing on Instagram. So I was kind of shocked. So, yes, the article is available online in the Vancouver Sun, but I couldn't promote it to my community on social media. So, so that is...
Well, while you're on that subject, there's a thought that crosses my mind. And I mean, I don't believe it's easy for the younger generations, but I do love the fact that for a 20-year-old, transitioning is a very different experience
than
it is for you or I.
Yeah.
But is there anything in the thought that you couldn't be the woman you are today if you hadn't been the man you were back then?
Well, it's impossible to speculate. I am the sum of my parts,
Right.
and that's my history, and that's my learning, and that's my hurts, and that's my blessings, all those things. So it's really hard to parse those out and tease them out to look at them separately, because they are inextricably entwined. I think it's useful to actually analyze and to take a look at those things, to have a clearer idea, and then take a look emotionally at how that's affecting you, and then how you go forth with your intention and how you relate to people, and how you choose your course of action in the work that you do or the relationships that you want to have.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot then. How you relate to someone today, pick anyone you like, and how you would have related to them, let's say 15 years ago, prior to transition. How is it different?
Well, as you say, it would vary from person to person, and it depends on how close I am. You know, I have some intimates, some people I've known for a long time, someone I know going back to the late 1960s, when we were in high school, and when I came out and wrote a letter to him, he just said, he wrote back and said, "Hey, you look great, babe. Doing any gigs, playing any shows?" And that was kind of it. And
it was one line.
It was very...
It's accepting.
Well, it was wonderful. And so I coincidentally, I came out on the day that was his birthday, so that's now my birthday. And we talk regularly. And we did talk a little bit more about it. And he told me, he said, you know, when you told me that, he said, I wasn't even sure if you were kidding or if you were serious. It didn't matter to me. We're friends. We've known each other since we were kids. So there was just an acceptance. And, you know, almost 9 years later, we're very close and we talk regularly. And so I don't talk to him any differently than I ever did.
Right.
But I have other friends. I have someone I had a very close partnership relationship with, and she is also completely accepting of me and loves
right.
me and is a very dear friend. And I have others, you know, I was just reflecting on someone who used to look up to me so much. I'm 5 years older than he is, and he has no interest in talking with me. And he used to look to me for approval and procure gigs and to do things and hire me to do recording with him and all kinds of things. And now he won't even return my calls or communication. And so I find that very common.
I tell myself when I come across such things that then they were never really your friend in the first place.
Yeah, yes, of course. Again, the word friend is very malleable. And what does that even mean? And when I talk about the friend I go back to grade 10 with, there's an intimacy, a closeness of sharing what you don't necessarily reveal to people that you don't know well. You don't know
right.
what their intentions are and how they would speak to you or treat you. And then there are other friends who are collegial, people that you work with and that you have fun and you hang out and you have meals and you talk about all kinds of things, you know, politics and life and the community and all kinds of things. But there is boundaries, personal boundaries that you don't cross, and you don't even think about it because it's not. There's enough other stuff to share. There's enough
right.
other things to share that doesn't necessarily isn't a factor, and then maybe something it will grow beyond that into something more close and more of a personal friendship. But it's still a friendship. It's a friendship of colleagues. It's a friendship of, you know, people in your community. And that's where a lot of that has dried up and disappeared. People that I used to hire in my bands and who are not comfortable being with a trans woman. And that's...
Well, I guess that's their choice.
Yeah.
But you'll make new contacts and new friends who kind of replace those.
Yeah. It's an ongoing learning process right now for me in terms of that kind of a thing. And the choice is, where do I go? What kind of relationships and what, you know, how do I want to pursue it that way? And, you know, there are different criteria by which I'm making those judgments now. And I make those judgments around how can I be of service? How can I be of use? And
right.
so I was just had a really interesting meeting with the queer committee at my acting union yesterday. We were talking about issues. We're in the middle of negotiating a new contract with businesses that do business in and create film and television in British Columbia. So it was really interesting sharing and talking about things and being able to be at the table to make suggestions about what our union wants to do to have in the contract for human rights for trans people on set, from things like hair and makeup or changing rooms or bathrooms and what, different people are going to have different degrees of comfort sharing different bathrooms, and if there could be, a no gender bathroom, making sure those kinds of things, and trying to get those things in contracts. So it's really interesting. And again, when you get a chance to talk about these issues, it raises everyone's awareness of what's at play there, what's in play, how to frame it to be in a negotiation.
That's hugely important. There are plenty of people, and I come across a lot within the trans community, who say things like, we don't get anything if we ask nicely, because we've been asking
or if we don't ask.
Well, there's also that. We don't get anything if we ask nicely. We've been asking for 30 years. Personally, I don't really subscribe to that idea, because I think you get more with honey than you get with acid.
Yeah.
And one of my hobby horses is try and be visible.
Yeah.
And that absolutely includes in things like union politics.
Mm-hmm.
But within virtually any organisation, there's a credit union here. I won't use the name. There's a credit union here that recently had an election for board members, and I was very disappointed to see there was not one person on their election list that was trans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they are a credit union that promotes themselves on the concepts of inclusivity, and just perhaps there was really no trans candidate that was suitable.
Mm-hmm.
But I absolutely believe, and especially within our age group, it's really important to be out there and as visible as possible.
Yeah.
And my point with that is that when people see someone who's trans, at whatever age, and they put a face to it, they're much less likely to be prejudicial. Because the people who are prejudicial against people who are trans, and I mean, you see this in the south of the States, most of them have never met a trans person, and they have no concept of what it is really all about. And while they're not interested in learning, if they see the person, who works in the bank has a trans badge, and or maybe is presenting trans, if they see the person who works on their car perhaps as trans, they are much, much less likely to just feel negative towards them. We've got to be out there, we've got to be visible.
Absolutely.
An interesting case there, or someone who crosses over in this conversation quite nicely. We were at the Junction the other day, and I think you saw down there Diversity Reigns, one of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Now, the sisters do amazing work, they're wonderful people. Diversity is 83 and so active. I don't know why, but whenever I see her, she seems to have a chicken in her hand. She carries around this rubber chicken, which is rather an odd thing to do, but it's sort of part of her identity in a strange way, and she's a very upbeat, funny individual. And at 83, I think she may have just turned 84 actually a couple of days ago, she is one of the most positive people, and especially about trans issues, that you could possibly hope to meet. You just can't not like her. So we don't have to be invisible. It's a question of how do we present our visibility, which brings me back to your rune. I think, Lockie, you described it, you sort of felt this sense of being at the top of a mountain, or going through a gateway, I think is one phrase you used.
Yeah.
You're right, going through a portal. Now, what you do as you go through that portal, how you deal with things and how you present, and how, the person that steps out of the other side of that portal must be very important when you're in a career like music and at this stage in your life.
Yeah, well, it's a really great metaphor for being at a tipping point of making change, of embracing change. And there are, at every turn, different choices to make that affect that change. They're interdependent. And so I am in a place of making many choices. I'm looking at trying to speak more. I'm looking for a literary agent to help book speaking engagements, which is a huge change for me. I speak a lot, I'm articulate, but most, in the past, this has all been in the music world. I've, lectured on my areas of specialization, around improvisation and composing for large orchestras and interdisciplinary work. I've done all kinds of things like that's my area. And so here I am trying to make sense of my transition and my place in the world. And I'm treated so differently. Oh, there goes my phone. I'm treated so differently. And trying to make sense of that and how to react to it, how to, and what it means, what the implications are in terms of how I am, what the dynamics are that I'm dealing in socially and politically, advocate for a more positive world, a more more empowered trans people. I speak to lots of people that are kind of in the spectrum of being non-binary or cross-dressers or trans. I talk to all kinds of people across that spectrum, and people are afraid to talk about it. They're afraid to expose their thinking or feelings about it often, and so listen. There are others that are speaking about it to some degree, and I just hear the degree to which people have processed some of the ideas that I'm still in the middle of processing, and some that I've worked through more. Luckily have had some good therapy in my life, so I've figured out how to ask myself good questions when I'm in a place of not understanding or feeling emotionally in crisis or socially in crisis, and how do I deal with it? And so lots of people haven't done that work of having had therapy, and especially around gender issues, most of us have not had objective counsel that we can talk with.
Especially at our age. I mean,
yeah, well, absolutely.
If one's 22 and talking about gender issues to a counsellor, one gets one particular approach. But if one's a little bit older and you speak to a counsellor about gender issues, it's a very different exercise. It takes a huge leap to get to the place where you're prepared to, because we were raised with so much shame around
stigma,
so much stigma around the idea of being, gender slightly non-conforming. It was absolutely shameful. Mm-hmm. So to even get to the stage where you do reach out to talk to someone, whether it be a counsellor, a therapist, or anyone else for that matter, is very, very hard. And what I would say, especially to the audience listening, I'm a big proponent of the drag show type format. Not particularly, whilst I enjoy it, not particularly for the art going on the stage, but for the people who are going to be in a drag community such as the Junction, where you do meet this very, very diverse group of people, and some of them are young and sort of bubbly and all the rest, but there are many who are our age, especially on Sunday afternoons when you often see the charity type shows, who are interested in the community, and the community is so important. When one is without community as a trans person, it's almost like being without family. And I could go on at length about this, which I'm not going to in this particular interview, but to be without community, one is so isolated, it's very, very hard to make great decisions. And I'm sure you felt that as you started on this path. I certainly did. The difference between when I started to be connected and when I was just guiltily throwing away clothes because I didn't want anyone to find them is enormous. And community, I cannot say enough how much, if someone is struggling, especially with depression, if someone is struggling, get some community. You need to get some friends who are trans. Go to a drag bar, watch some of these shows, but look around and see other people who are in the same place as you, so you can get into conversations about, what comes next and how does it feel. Should one even transition? If you've got a grandson who's living with you and absolutely can't accept it, how do you process that? Or you have more likely, you have sort of elder sons and whatever, families. How do you bring it into play in a way that's appropriate for you and your family and the lifestyle that you lead? Now, both you and I are in wonderfully privileged positions in a sense. We live in a very, very accepting city. If you were living in the middle of, Kentucky, it could be a very different story.
Yeah.
Now, just wrapping up for a moment, Nikita, your book, Both Sides of the Great Divide, it's available through Amazon.
Yes.
You can also get it at thenikita.com, and that's THEE, Nikita.com.
Yeah. Transgender publishing as well.
Right. And there are, I think, an increasing number of reviews of this going around. I know there's some information on FionaDobson.com about it.
My website.
And your website's pretty
and also my
comprehensive.
YouTube channel. It's Nikita Carter, my YouTube. So there's an interview with me talking about the book.
Right. Now,
in more detail.
For anybody who is in that slightly higher age group, this makes fascinating reading, not simply because of your story, but how it relates to every one of us.
Yeah.
And while, as I said, there's lots of younger YouTubers doing wonderful jobs, I mean, you've got to love Mia Mulder and ContraPoints and the others. Our age group is somewhat neglected.
Mm-hmm.
But reaching out for that book, the hard copy is there as well, isn't it? But there's another electronic version. It gives a little insight. So I would encourage anyone who is in this realm, and when I say in this realm, sometimes it's cross-dressers who haven't yet made that leap to stepping further, and maybe they will and maybe they won't, and other times it's people who are living in a transgender lifestyle who sometimes just feel a bit awkward about it. I think everyone will benefit from this book.
Yeah, well, thank you.
And hopefully you reach out and get it. Nikita, what's next for you?
Well, hopefully some reading and speaking around the book. And I hope to tour Canada and to go to the United States as well. Book speaking tours in colleges and so on. I'm putting a new band together. It'll be called The Nikita, of course, which will be an opportunity for me to make a band that has beats and dance, and to tell some stories and my perspective of what I'm seeing in my life and what I'm going through as a trans person in Canada and in the world, and the madness that is the world these days.
It certainly is a mad world, which some people will get that reference, others won't.
If you're old enough.
Oh God, did you see Phil Silver's in that? Just such a master. I mean, there were so many great performances in
Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks was awesome as well. And Spencer Tracy. Okay, so anyone who is interested in reaching Nikita to do a talk, anywhere in the States, Canada, whatever, wherever, thenikita.com will be able to put you in touch.
Yep.
You'll be able to find contact.
My email and social media are there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Nikita, and we'll probably catch up on this one another time as well. Thanks ever so much for coming
Jules.
to talk with me.
Thank you.
And for all the members of FionaDobson.com.